Thank you. So I know we go over these every time, but if you want to go to the next slide, our virtual meeting protocols, please keep yourself muted if there's going to be background noise, but feel free to unmute at any time. I know it says you can use chat box but this is a small group. So just if you have a question, feel free to come off mute and jump in. If we do hear a lot of background noise or hold music for any reason, we'll just remove you from the meeting, but you can join back as soon as you are able. And just a reminder that if you're using a webcam, that others can see your video, and that it is also, this meeting is being recorded, so that will be on there. And you can go to the next slide. So we are going to do introductions. Thought it might take me a little longer to get through those virtual meeting protocols, but we can go ahead and get started. And if others come in later, they can introduce themselves as well. So if you can just share your name, where you're located, and any successes or accomplishments for you, your family, or your community. And Sharice, would you like to go first?
I was like, yeah, don't call me.
Oh, no.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So Sharice Rhodes, she, her, hers, Tacoma, Washington, and any successes, I guess, community successes. We've been hosting, planting the seed. I don't want to call them trainings, but like to empower community to know like what organizations are out there and how they support like your family and community. So like one of the trainings are not trainings. One of the things is like we invite other organizations to kind of share like what they do, how they are support, or even how you hold them accountable, like if that support isn't happening. So like we've had OEO, we've had PAVE, we've had the office of, we had OSPI. Tomorrow we are having Rebecca Fry do a de-escalation training. I don't know. And then today I decided to, I keep doing these things, trying to empower community, but not really seeing myself in that power. So today I decided that after this meeting, I'm going to fill out an application to be trained on how to run for school board.
That is awesome, Sharice. I think you would be amazing at that. Those community gatherings where people are learning about the services out there sound really cool too. So good work. And that's so awesome about the school board. You'll have to keep us updated. Tammy, you're next on my screen.
I'm Tammy England from Olympia, Washington. Successes, accomplishments. Well, one thing that for my family is my 18-year-old daughter is graduating high school this in June, and she has been chosen to be a speaker at graduation. And she's been accepted to University of Washington pre-science. She's planning on majoring in neuroscience, and she's gotten scholarships for almost all of her tuition. So mama doesn't have to work all this extra because we don't qualify for a lot need-based scholarships. And then with our little guy that we adopted, we're having some successes. You know, we have bumps and bruises, but I think overall we're getting better little by little.
Thank you for sharing that, Tammy, and congratulations to you. It sounds like you have a pretty amazing oldest there, so that's exciting. Alina, would you like to share?
I can. Alina Swart, she, her, Clarkston, Washington. And honestly, I just never feel like I have any successes or anything to share. I joined the maternal mortality review panel. I guess that's something.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting opportunity. I can definitely relate to sometimes feeling like there aren't any successes or accomplishments, but you know, you're here and we appreciate that. So thank you. James, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is James. I'm located down here in Ocean Shores, Washington. Accomplishment is we're finally on the path to adopt one of the little kiddos that we have in our house that we've had for about 6 years now.
Wow, that's awesome, James. Thank you for sharing. So that is all of our parents, PAG members in the room. So we can do DCYF intros now, and I can start. My name is Emily Morgan. I use she, her pronouns. I am in Spokane, so on the land of the Spokane tribe. And successes and accomplishments. Let me think. I should have already had something in mind. I think personally, sometimes I can really relate to Alina that it feels when you can just be in it, it feels hard to identify successes and accomplishments. But work wise, we are making moves on doing recruitment for PAG. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. And that's something I'm really excited about because it's been a bit of a process to get some things through since we haven't done it in a while, but we're excited about that. Allison, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'm happy to. Good evening. I'm Allison Kretzinger. I'm our Director of Public Affairs here at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And Emily and Jessica are all part of my team here at the agency. Happy to be with you tonight. I live on Vashon Island. And that's where I am this evening. And successes and accomplishments for me or my family or community. Man, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of successes to highlight at DCYF that are good, and we often forget to talk about them. I think we're coming off the heels of a really successful legislative session for the agency in the early learning space and child welfare and prevention space across the agency. So excited about that. Yeah, and Sharice, feel free to reach out. I am also in my other life on the school board here locally and have been doing that for a couple of years. I'm happy to chat. Good to see you all.
Thanks, Allison.
I will definitely take you up on that.
Yeah, that's a great connection. Jessica, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, Jessica Spencer. I am in the Tri-Cities, Richland, and successes, I would say we recently moved here, so kind of getting settled, which is nice. And then my little 6-year-old is, I think, under 20 days left in kindergarten and doing well. So just so happy about that.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm really excited to introduce or have Emily introduce herself to you guys. Emily is our new Deputy Director of Community Engagement.
Yeah, hi everybody. Emily Grossman, she, her, hers. I'm in Seattle, North Seattle. Let's see. I've been with the agency for exactly 1 month today, so that's my accomplishment to share.
Thanks,
Thank
Emily.
you.
Okay, so we're a little ahead of time, so I think we can have the recruitment and July meeting discussion now. Jessica, if you don't mind, perfect. You're so on top of it. So I know that we have not been able to meet in person since before the pandemic, and that's something that you guys have mentioned that you really want to get back to. And so we are excited to get back to that. As you know, we were planning on meeting in person July 12th, our next meeting. It was going to be an all-day meeting. And we were hoping to have recruitment start the beginning of May. So, send out the application to all of you, send it out to communities, and spend the entire month of May doing outreach and recruitment to try to get some more parents on this group. And we had some trouble we're getting those applications through. So there was a delay, and we obviously haven't gotten recruitment out yet. We should be able to get it out within the next couple of weeks, but that does kind of push back the timeline to where there was some concern that new parents coming on to PAG might not be able to arrange things in time to join join us for the July in-person meeting. So I was wondering how you guys would feel about having the July meeting be an evening virtual meeting like we're doing now, and having our September 20th meeting be the in-person meeting. So hopefully we have enough time to do a little longer for recruitment and get new advisory group members kind of oriented and onboarded.
I like that idea. Where would the meeting be?
Right now, we were looking at the 4 Points, is it 4 Points Sheraton, 4 Points by Marriott? It is 4 Points Sheraton, by SeaTac.
I
Okay,
think it's Marriott, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just looking for the general area of the state.
Yeah,
So SeaTac, okay.
Yeah, SeaTac is where we're planning for sure, and we've been in talks
Okay.
with the hotel.
Okay.
Okay, so we heard from Tammy. She thinks that sounds like a good idea. Hi, Remy or Dion? Yeah, Dion. I was gonna say I'm not familiar with Remy, but
Sorry,
no, you're fine.
sorry about that. I'm all over the place. Yes, Dion, caregiver. Was there a question?
Well, I just wanted to say welcome and give you
you.
the opportunity to introduce yourself if you want. I know you just jumped on, so don't want to put you on the spot, but we were sharing our name, where we're located, and any successes and accomplishments for you, your family, or your community.
Yeah, so I'm Dion, Silverdale, Washington, foster mom, have a bunch of kids. We had a successful swim lesson today. So I'm gonna
Yay.
celebrate that.
That's awesome. I'm
Yeah.
excited to get my son in swim lessons.
It's so important.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And Dion, we were also talking about, this group hasn't had the opportunity to meet in person since before the pandemic. And we were planning on doing the July 12th meeting in person in the SeaTac area. And we're talking about pushing that to the September 20th meeting in the SeaTac area. Because our recruitment hasn't gone out yet, and we wanted to give new parents time to get things situated and make arrangements to attend the meeting, and we're not sure there would be time July 12th. So I just wanted to leave that up to the group and see how you guys feel about that.
I mean, that logic makes sense. My only concern would be September, kids are back in school and we're back on those regular schedules, which some of us, it might be a little tricky to get out. I could try to make either work, but summertime, I feel like I've got a little bit more freedom.
Okay, thank you for that, Dion. That makes sense.
I'm happy you said that, Dion, because that's the same thing I was thinking. Like, I want other parents to have, that flexibility in that time in order to put things together. But I don't know, for me, it's like the summer is a little easier than when you go into school. So like when you say an all-day meeting, could you like unpack a little more like what that means? Like, is that like from 8 to 5? Is that like, because I know like from some of the other parents, it seems like you'd also have to travel over. So like, instead of it being a day, it's like maybe a 2-day excursion for them. So I guess I'm just looking for more of that background logistics.
Yeah, that's a good question, Sharice. So the meeting would likely be 9 to 4:30. We could have some wiggle room on if you guys wanted to start later or end earlier. And yes, we would arrange for travel for members. So, airfare or rental car or gas to get to SeaTac. And if you're more than 50 miles away, we can reserve a hotel room for you as well. And sometimes in the past, Dion brought up a good point, that kids will be in school. Some parents like to bring their kids with them, which is totally fine. That the hotel we're looking at has a pool. But so yeah, it would be 9 to 4:30 roughly. And we provide light refreshments and lunch as well. James or Alina, do you guys have any thoughts? Don't feel like
I was just about to unmute. I was going to raise my hand first, but then you asked. So would family be welcome then?
yeah, so we wouldn't, I think how it's worked in the past, if you're your partner, whoever is with you or your kids don't need to participate in the meeting, but we can definitely work around having your kids around.
So like a pool for them to have something to do while we're all meeting and stuff?
Yes, but I don't know if there's a lifeguard. So if you're
Well,
traveling,
the husband's tour.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're traveling along with kids, I don't know about that, but yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a pool. So that's what we were kind of thinking if people wanted to.
Yeah, all I have is when kids go back to school. That's my only concern.
Mhm.
And not in June. I'm really busy in June. Like, I don't think I could fit one more thing in June.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, I wonder if maybe we, and I'm kind of just thinking out loud too. I wonder, hearing that summer is good, but you guys are okay pushing it to allow for more recruitment time. Maybe we push the July meeting to August and don't meet in July and try and find a time in August prior to school starting. Are there any thoughts on that? I see a head nod.
And that would still be virtual, or I guess I'm trying to figure out why the move into August. Because I thought she said June, not July.
So July 12th is our next scheduled meeting. We don't have a meeting scheduled in June. July 12th is when we're scheduled to meet next, and the plan was for that to be the CTAC in-person meeting. There will be a virtual option. All of our meetings, if we ever meet in person, we'll give a virtual option as well for those who can't travel or can't make it. I was thinking August to, instead of having the September meeting be in person, which is our next scheduled meeting after July, maybe we push the July meeting to August and still meet at the regular scheduled time in September, which would be an evening meeting like this. So no meeting in July, meeting someday in August. We'd probably have to send out a doodle poll at a CTAC location from about 9 to
Oh, so that's what you meant. So to push it so that you do it in August so that we could be in person.
correct, but still
Okay.
give some
Okay,
some
I
time.
was
for-
confused. I was like, wait a minute. She said June. Why are we skipping July? Oh, I got it now. I got it. Long day, but I got it.
Yeah, no worries. So does that sound okay to everyone else then? Okay,
Honestly, I still think that we could meet in July, even if it was just like this, but just to kind of touch base, maybe firm up plans, just kind of know what's going on. But that's just my feelings on it. I kind of like to keep up with. It's easier to kind of know what's going on when we're talking like this than it is for me when I read an email.
mhm.
I don't know how others feel, but that's me.
Yeah, but these are only typically 90 minutes. And if we're doing an all day thing, wouldn't there also be time in there for us to unpack in the process?
Yes, I was thinking that when we do the in-person meeting, if we're able to have some new parents after recruitment, that it would be a good time to get to know each other, because I feel like, there's been some people were on this group and met in person prior to the pandemic, but there's going to be new parents and some people haven't met in person, so there'd be time for a connection with each other too, so that when we're meeting virtually in the future after the in-person meeting, there's a little more of a sense of community in this group. We can also revisit the charter, which hasn't been visited in several years.
By touching base and knowing what's going on, I meant for that in-person meeting.
Okay.
Just firming up plans, just going over, what's going to happen. Doesn't have to be the whole 90 minutes, maybe just, enough for us to kind of say, what's going on, where we're definitely meeting, what we need to bring with us, or, what we need to be thinking about before that meeting, so that we kind of know what we're going to be talking about in person during that meeting. That's kind of what I meant. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
No, that's actually a really good idea, Alina. I didn't think about that, but that could also be a time where people can ask, travel questions and things like that, since it's been a while since we've done that. Okay, I like that idea. So we can kind of have a drop-in space at the July 12th meeting in the evening, virtual like this, and then find a time in August that we can meet after recruitment is done. Okay, do we all feel okay about that? Any questions, comments? Natasha, welcome. Sorry, I didn't see you come in.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm just listening. Thanks.
Yeah, would you like to share your name, where you're located, and any successes or accomplishments? You don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
So yeah, my name's Natasha Fechtominger. I'm in Kitsap County, Paulsbo. And I guess probably it hasn't been accomplished yet, but I submitted my declaration and I'm running for school board in Kitsap County, North Kitsap County.
Well, we just have like a school board group
What a
tonight.
theme.
Yeah.
Are there other people on here doing that too?
I am about to file, to put in an application to go through a cohort where they'll train me on what to do. I haven't officially filed, so you're like way ahead of me.
Oh, yay, good for you, Cherise. It happened really quick. I didn't expect it either. Can I ask what group you're gonna, because I wanted to do that too, but then it came too quickly. But what are you doing it with? Which group?
I would be with Surge, and I know that they support people of color and especially women. Pierce County, King County, and what is Vancouver?
Yay, that's awesome. I'm excited for you.
Clark.
There you go, Clark. Yes, thank you.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations, Natasha, and thank you again for joining us. Okay, well, now that we have the next meeting kind of figured out, we'll send out a doodle poll or a Survey Monkey or something in the follow-up email to find a time that works for most of us for the August in-person meeting, but we will still keep the July 12th meeting date. We'll just move it to the evening like this one. So stay tuned for the follow-up email for all of that info. And now I will turn it over to Allison Kretzinger.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Emily. And it's great to be with you all. I was invited this evening to talk about our legislative planning. So a couple things that we're hoping to accomplish this evening. I'm going to pull slides up on my screen so I know what's happening. If we want to go to the next, slide, what we're going to do is sort of wrap up, talk a little bit about what happened in the legislative arena in the 23 legislative session, which just concluded. And in fact, the governor just signed the budget yesterday. We're going to then look ahead and have some discussion about what should DCYF be asking for as we head into the 24 legislative session. We've done some preliminary thinking internally, and now we're sort of in that phase where we're gathering robust feedback from stakeholders, parents, providers, those impacted, to help inform what we would put forward and through the formal, what is called the decision package or agency request legislation process. So if we want to go to the next slide, I am hopeful by the end of our sort of hour together, may live a little faster, may take a little longer, we will all walk away with a better understanding. I will say this presentation is really focused on the childcare and early learning investments. There are some other tentacles of DCYF, and I'm writing a note right now to my team thinking about, Emily, how we may come back in July briefly and sort of touch on some of the other pieces beyond the early learning stuff as well. But this will be focused sort of most squarely on the early learning and childcare pieces. So hopefully we'll walk away with a good understanding of what happened there. We want to have a shared understanding of our legislative work over the next biennium, heading into the next legislative session, and solicit feedback from you all on what we should be asking for. So with that, a little bit of context as we headed into the 23 legislative session, which was started in January of this year. So this is context as of November or December of last year. This most recent legislative session was a biennial budget setting session. So the legislature in Washington meets every year, but every other year they contemplate a big budget that they set for the state for the next 2 fiscal years. That budget goes into effect July 1. That's what the governor signed yesterday. So this legislative session was really the session for innovation, new ideas, contemplating more spending, allocating revenue. When they come back to town next session, it's called a supplemental year. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. The other reality that sort of guided the agency's requests and legislative approach heading into this most recent session was the fact that we are implementing significant investment and policy change across this agency. We have received billions of dollars to support childcare providers through federal stimulus grants, as well as the Fair Start for Kids Act that we're rolling out. We have many projects underway in the child welfare space, all about reform and thinking about how we keep families together, supporting families with prevention and guardianships, placement stability, better supports for caregivers, licensed foster parents, relative caregivers through the licensing process, as well as more additional resources and support. So we have a number of projects and initiatives that were in flight, are in flight, will continue to be in flight. And that really influenced how much bandwidth and capacity do we have for more change, more big vision, more system reform. We also know that heading into the last legislative session, we're still dealing with the impacts of COVID. Although the state of the emergency has technically ended both at the state level and the federal level, the recovery and impacts of COVID has not been equal across our population and across populations and across our state. We know that the economic reality that was triggered by the pandemic has left a harder impact on some. And so really that was something the legislature had to grapple with as they thought about investments. We also saw heading into last legislative session and throughout legislative session, a real mixed and budget and economic reality. Revenue forecasts in the out years were down, but in the current year and the most recent and coming year, they were up. And so that creates an interesting budget problem, an interesting math problem. Full disclosure, I'm really bad at math. And so it's a good thing I'm not writing the budget. But it does create an interesting budget problem if 4 years from now, you have less money than you're going to have next year, but you got to balance your budget and spend the money next year. So how do you make investments in phased ways that balance in both a 2-year budget and a 4-year budget cycle? Because that's the requirement for the legislature. I will say all of this combined and coming out of session, DCYF was positioned really strongly. And so that was fantastic. I will also just reinforce what Emily said at the beginning. If you have questions, feel free just to come off mute and jump in, type them in the chat, raise your hand. I'll try to monitor the chat. Emily or Jessica, you can help me monitor the chat and the hands as well, but feel free to jump in if you have questions. We're going to cover a lot of ground tonight. So continuing in the theme of the 23 legislative session, if we want to go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about 3 decision packages that the agency put forward to be funded in the governor's budget and to consider. These are important because one of the questions we're going to contemplate later is, of these, should we revisit things for this supplemental ask that weren't funded or didn't pass? And so I'll spend a little time talking about them, and then we'll revisit them in the discussion portion of the meeting. But our first decision package I want to talk about is really about how do we help childcare work better for families? The only real lever DCYF has, if you will, or fiscal lever for childcare access and affordability is through Working Connections Childcare Subsidy. That's the subsidy program that families can apply for and benefit from that helps offset the cost of childcare. Payment goes directly to the provider once families are eligible and make arrangements in agreement with a provider to enroll. So we have, over the years, through the Fair Start for Kids Act and prior to, tried to do a variety of things that expanded eligibility, shifted the copay. We knew for a long time copays were a barrier for families. They may have been eligible economically, but the copay calculation was prohibitive because copays would go from $100 to $700 overnight if you made $1 more, and that was just a barrier for families. So the Fair Start for Kids Act really solved some of the major cornerstone challenges that existed in subsidy. It increased eligibility, it fixed and capped copays, and it increased rates. And so those 3 sort of legs of the stool, we think, are somehow going to be the secret sauce to help get more families engaged in the subsidy system, to help offset the cost of care, of childcare for families. And we know there's more we can be doing to really reform eligibility in the Working Connections Childcare Program. Oh, Tammy, I hope you feel better. Just by way of background and history, Working Connections Childcare is the subsidy program funded by the Federal Child Care Development Block Grant. It came out of the welfare reform era and was really about how do we help families get back to work. And many states, Washington included, put a lot of barriers in accessing subsidy. And And as the nation has moved towards a more universal embracing of early childhood education, recognizing the opportunity that exists in that sphere of birth to 5, birth to 12, and really thinking about the investments we've made as a state in quality, we recognize that leveraging our childcare subsidy system to bring more families in and help provide that financial resource is going to help grow access and opportunity for kids and their families. It means parents can go to work and not have to worry if kids are in a safe and quality place. And so we recognize more is needed to continue to make eligibility better for families. So what you see here on this screen are a number of bullet points that we asked for last year. Only the green highlight there, the middle one, removing 12-month restriction on homeless grace period, was funded in the governor's budget and ultimately passed the legislature. So there were a number of other components that we asked for and have done the modeling around, and we'll contemplate putting forward again. I'll highlight a couple. I don't want to spend a ton of time in the weeds, but if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer those if the descriptions aren't clear. So the first one is authorizing full-time care for children. We know that childcare for private pay parents is you pay a full freight, whether your kid shows up for 2 hours or 12 hours for 1 day or 20 days in a month. And the way historically Working Connections has worked is that we would pay when the kid is there, and it doesn't match or mirror how the private market of childcare works, which creates challenges for providers in accepting subsidy, which limits access. It also, when we've made some changes to make that better around the attendance policy, but one of the requirements that still exists is that based on your need, your work need, or your need for care, we will authorize a part day or a full day. And we'd like to move to a system where we just authorize a full day. And parents can choose to take their kid for 4 hours on Tuesday and 10 hours on Wednesday, or 10 hours every day, or 4 hours, 3 days. But that full-time care is authorized. What we find is that when full-time care is not authorized, and we have a lot more part day authorizations that end up in sort of cycles of compliance and hours and audit findings. And it's burdensome for providers and for the agency, and it's not good for families. And so that is one component of this decision package that we asked for that was not funded last year, but are contemplating again this year. You see a variety of changes to allow participation in ECAP or Head Start as an approved activity, requiring only one parent to be participating in an approved activity. Medical appointments or job search counting as approved activities. So you see a lot of changes on here that really contemplate how do we help make more families eligible and remove barriers. The other thing we asked for last time around is excluding child support, Social Security, and supplemental security payments as countable income for both Working Connections and ECAP. And the reason I want to zone in on that child support one is because it'll come back up this year. One of the realities is when we calculate eligibility, we have to calculate the child support that is ordered. And the reality is for many families where child support orders exist, that payment may not come through every month. So it will impact you adversely in accessing and being eligible for a benefit like Working Connections. But we also know for many families, the reality is they are not getting that expected child support payment on a consistent basis from their partner that is agreed to. And so really contemplating that as well.
And I'm happy for that one.
So
I was one of those people who was ordered. And for me, it was like, if I ever received it.
Yeah.
So I'm so happy on that one.
Yeah, excellent, Sharice. Save that too for the end, because one of the feedback we're going to ask for is what of these that didn't get funded should we ask for? And having that direct feedback, that real life experience is super helpful in building the case for some of these changes. We know it's a barrier. We know it's a burden. So that's sort of a summary of what was in the support for families package related to childcare and what was funded. If we want to go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about supporting providers in accessing childcare. So as we think about our moving parts, we have a focus on children and families and their caregivers around how do we support them in accessing what they need, but also how do we support providers, the workforce, those providing the care. We need the workforce and we need to support families' access. And so balancing both of those. So we had a variety of things in the decision package that we asked for. 3 of them were funded, the non-standard hours bonus. This will also be a huge benefit to families. So this is a bonus payment for an increased payment for care outside of traditional working hours. So in the evening, overnight, on the weekends, if providers offer that care, a lot of families need care in non-traditional hours. And the standard day rates, if you will, don't make that as easy for providers to offer. And so this increase is intended to help expand access to those after hours care, evenings, overnight, and on the weekends. And it's really common in the private industry. My brother works at Costco and he gets a Sunday premium when he works on Sunday because a lot of folks don't want a Sunday shift. So it's very common to have increased and premium, if you will, hours on some of those less desirable times of day to sort of do some of those jobs. So excited about that. We also we saw increased funding in the last legislative session for grants, childcare complex needs and equity grants. These were 2 grant programs funded as part of Fair Start for Kids Act. Demand far outpaced the amount of resource available last biennium from providers to better increase and enhance supports. And so we saw increases in both of those budgets. A couple other things on here that weren't funded that we'll contemplate including this year, an infant rate enhancement. We know infant care is hardest to find in most communities, if not all communities. And so we see an infant rate enhancement. We also want to change our rules to align our overpayment collection with federal requirements. Right now, our rules, like was true in the background checks, are a little more stringent than the feds require. And so want to really align those with what the feds require, both for consistency, but to relieve some burden for the agency and for providers. So that's sort of a summary of the second package we put forward in the space of early learning and childcare related to providers. And the third piece we'll talk about is ECAP. We want to go to, oh, perfect. So as folks know, by 2026-27 school year, there is an ECAP entitlement on the books. Any family who has a child under 135% FPL is eligible and entitled to an ECAP slot available. And so we are marching towards that entitlement. So as part of that, we know we needed a rate increase like childcare, like many vendor rate increases. We know we needed a rate increase. And so we asked for a pretty substantial rate increase. It was not fully funded by the legislature. We asked for a 40% rate increase, but that for school day slots. So those are your slots that map onto your school calendar, if you will. That was not fully funded. We got about 19% for that school day slot and 14%, I think, for the working day and a small rate increase for part day. We also asked for slots. We need more slots to meet entitlement. We asked for 6,000 slots. We got 1,000 slots over the next biennium. So pretty far off where we think we need to be at pace to meet entitlement. We also asked for conversion. So we know research is pretty clear that dosage and duration matter, and family need is pretty clear in telling us that most families need a full day of access to high quality early learning. A 2-hour, a 3-hour, a 4-hour model is sometimes challenging, although some families may choose that. We certainly don't want to eliminate that. But we know that research is really clear on dosage and duration as well as family need. And so we continue to ask for conversion of our part day slots. Right now, we have about 15,000 slots total available in ECAP, and about 10,000 of those are part day. So part of our goal is to move more of those part day slots to that school day or that working day to better meet family need, offer more full day care. And then we saw increased funding in the complex need fund specific for ECAP providers. There were a couple small elements of this decision package not funded, but generally the bulk of the ask here was funded. So the next slide is just going to show a summary of all the investment made in the early learning space based on those decision packages that we asked for, rate increases, the collective bargaining agreement, as well as the 3 decision packages I talked about. So you can see that, you know, we asked for a substantial investment, and you can see what was funded in the final budget there. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is a continued, I need to remember to update these titles. The budget has now been signed, so this is final. This is a continued investment in other things the agency asked for outside of those major early learning packages. We asked for background check fees to be waived, organizational license pilot to continue. We asked for home visiting, funding increases, and slot expansion. In addition, culturally relevant language access. We've done some work on understanding how do we better reach clients, providers, families who speak languages other than English, and came up with a report and a set of recommendations and converted that into a decision package, and are pleased to see that funded. That'll fund things like website translation, staff to help with language access, training for staff on what it looks like to be culturally responsive with appropriate language, etc. Additionally, early learning facilities was funded. So you can see a pretty substantial list here. And then the last slide related to investments are things that were also funded by the legislature in this area, but didn't initiate from an ask from the agency. So another grant program for early learning providers to support access to tribal programming, some proviso work, early ECAP continuation. So this is a more intensive wraparound model for infant and toddler care, similar to ECAP, but for infants and toddlers. We also see investment in the Washington Communities for Children, which some of you may be aware of and part of. They had some PDG resources, preschool development grant resources that are sunsetting. So we see continued investment there. We also see a rate increase for early supports for infants and toddlers. This is our ESIT program. This is early intervention, children who have an identified delay or developmental disability, getting that early intervention support in their home from therapists. DCYF manages that program, and we see an increased ask there as well. So if we want to go to the next slide, I just want to highlight a couple pieces of legislation that passed that impact the space. 5225 increases access to working connections for employees in childcare, licensed childcare centers and family homes, as well as children who may be from undocumented families or undocumented themselves. We also see the waiving of background check fees permanently for background checks administered by DCYF for childcare providers, ECAP providers, as well as group care providers on the child welfare side. 1550 is about transitional kindergarten and codifying that program. And then 1525 expands access to working connections for those registered in state apprenticeships. So the last slide before I take a breath and a sip of water is just the total investment in the early learning space in the budget this year. You see on the sort of right, the first column, what DCYF asked for, what was in the governor's budget, and then your final investment there was about almost 700 million new dollars in sort of all the things that we talked about: rates, expanded eligibility, ECAP slots, etc. So I'm going to take a breath and a drink and see if there's questions before we sort of pivot to now looking ahead to the 24 legislative session or reactions. All right, I'm not seeing any, but jump off mute if there are. So as we prepare for the next legislative session, because in state agency land, there is no rest for the weary, and we conclude session and jump right into the next one, all in the same 24-hour period, it feels like. We are on sort of a map, on our roadmap here. We are charging towards submitting our asks, our considerations for the governor's budget in September. That's when our elements are due: our fiscal asks, our decision packages, and our bill asks. So right now we're in build and development, which stakeholdering is robustly part of. We'll submit in September. The governor will do his magic and build his budget. The legislature will come back to town in January, and we'll run through a short session, which will convene in March, and then we'll begin implementation of all the things that come out of the next legislative session. So fairly straightforward timelines here that if you've been with us before, this is a familiar map. So if we want to go, perfect. So just thinking ahead, what are we walking into? Well, the 24 legislative session is a long ways away. It's in January. So some of this is having a crystal ball here, or pretending I have a crystal ball and predicting what it may or may not look like. But there are a few things we do know. We do know it is a supplemental year. That means it's a year where the legislature is really just coming to town for a short 60-day window and making minor tweaks and minor adjustments to the supplemental budget, thinking about, tweaks to legislation, et cetera. It's not really a time when lawmakers are intended to have big policy debate and pass big policy reform. Sometimes that happens in a supplemental year, but that's not really the goal or the intent of a supplemental year. We also know that DCYF is still implementing massive and significant investment and policy change across our agency. There is not a corner of this agency that does not have reform and change work underway based on the creation of the new agency, our strategic plan, our theory of change, et cetera. Every part of this agency is really thinking about and working towards reform, better practice, more resource out the door, et cetera. We also know and have continued to sort of tinker with this mixed economic reality where economists are predicting a downturn in revenues in the future years. And so that is something we will be, that is guidance that will come to us from OFM and the governor's office, and we will have to, will inform our sort of caliber, if you will, or scale of asks. So all that to say, it probably means a more limited scope in both what DCYF puts forward as far as pieces of legislation, innovation, as well as total spending. And this is some of the major projects underway in the early learning space. We continue to be guided by our framework of supporting access to affordable, affordability, and quality. Ultimately, we want to support access to affordable, high quality early learning experiences for children across the state. And these major projects underway are helping us get there. So I'm going to talk about where we're at now for 24 ideas, and then there's 4 slides I'll go through here, and then we've got a couple discussion slides that will have a Jamboard and a Survey Monkey, and hopefully Jessica or Emily will help me realize how all those things work or what I'm supposed to do. But the first one is, so parallel to what I talked about in the 23 asks, really revisiting that concept of how do we support families in accessing childcare. And so the 3 areas that we're really thinking about are how do we have better expanded infant toddler access? Is that rates? Is that something else? How do we expand eligibility for ECAP, Head Start, and adoptive families or guardianships, if you will? And then really looking at, I think, Charisse, you said it beautifully, really looking at, do we revisit that ask around income, especially the child support piece, but about income and excluding that because we know the reality for so many families. So those are 3 of the ideas that are sort of bubbled to the top in our first round of internal and external feedback gathering. The next is continuing on the theme of infant care, is reconsidering asking for that infant rate increase to expand access. And again, I talked about the alignment and overpayment. And then the last one on here is around shared services and technical assistance to access funding and resources. So as more and more investments have come in that support childcare providers, it's become sort of a web and a maze to navigate what grant programs, what relief programs, in addition to running a business. And many childcare providers are excellent childcare providers, and they came into it because they are really good at that. And so business, sort of running a business may not be their reflexive muscle. And so how do we help bolster some of those skills to make it more, make it easier and make it easier to do and digest? And so that's really what that shared service hub is looking like. We also will have an ask around ECAP entitlement, as I spoke about, rates and slot increases, capacity and infrastructure, and then data and reporting elements are some of the things we're considering there. And then the other area I want to highlight is ESIT, or early supports for infants and toddlers. This is early intervention for children 0 to 3. We have heard throughout session that ESIT providers' rates were inadequate. And so there was an ask bill actually that tried to move to change their rate and their count date, if you will, of when they could start getting paid for serving a child, or count that child in their roles, require a law change. In addition, we want to ask for resource to create a seamless referral between our Plan of Safe Care and ESIT. So Plan of Safe Care, folks may be familiar, is we often have referrals come in through child welfare intake for parents who may be using substance. And during pregnancy, there's not intervention that DCYF can offer currently through a CPS intervention. And so we have created a pilot where we do a warm handoff from intake to Help Me Grow within reach and a referral network, and connect that family who's come to our attention with treatment and wraparound care, wraparound support to get them into treatment to hopefully help mitigate the use. What we know about infant removals is Washington has one of the highest rates of infant removal, and 70-ish% of those are because of substance-related use and substance-related issues. And so if we can really partner and support that pregnant or parenting individual pre-birth and help course correct, we really prevent that need for a child welfare intervention. And that is really the goal. And so then how do we create some seamless referrals between that population and our ESIT provider? ESIT population is sort of an area we're looking at. And because it's never too early to look way into the future, I just want to flag there are other things that we are continuing to put on the list for the next biennial ask, which will be the big ask, We know that we'll have an updated cost of care model for childcare rates that really moves towards away from a market rate survey and towards a cost of care work, continuing to meet and march towards ECAP entitlement, and then expanded subsidy to the higher income brackets as part of the Fair Start for Kids Act. So some other things on the horizon, bigger investments in the biennial ask, but so wanted to flag those for situational awareness, but really want to focus in on, if we go to the next slide, sort of where we're at for the 24 legislative session. So there is a SurveyMonkey link that Jessica just put in the chat. And if folks can click on that and do take some time and do this survey. It's one question, and you can check up to 2 of the items that we talked about that you'd like to see. And please ask questions if you have questions about any of them that are on the list. It's a pretty expansive list. And I have a visitor. I don't know if it's a small child or a dog, so I apologize in advance.
I'm just going out the door.
It's a small child who's only wearing half his clothes, so apologies in advance.
We can also send this SurveyMonkey out in the
Oh, that'd be
fall
great.
now too. Yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah. And then the next, I mean, so maybe that's what we can sort of do is walk through the 2 questions, Emily, and then feel free to send it out if folks want more time to sort of think about it and ask questions. This is just the list of all the things. And then activity 2, there's a Jamboard. Here's the link. And you can click on that Jamboard link, and I don't totally know how to use Jamboard. So Emily, I'm happy to defer to you, Jessica, about sort of how to manipulate a Jamboard.
Yeah, Jessica, if you want to stop share, I'll pull up the Jamboard. And Jessica did put the link in the chat, so anybody who is able, has a computer handy or whatever, feel free to jump on that Jamboard. It works better on Google Chrome, so maybe copy paste into Google Chrome. And so you can feel free to add things yourself using the sticky note function over here. Or if you just want to talk out loud, I'll take the notes for you. So don't feel like you have to use the Jamboard, but that is a way to add some information anonymously if you'd like. So it looks like the first question, what ideas from our initial ideas list from 2024 are you excited for us to move forward with?
And those are the slides there that I went through, those 4 slides. And I think, Emily, we can keep a Jamboard open and send the link out as well.
Yes, yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Excellent.
Any initial thoughts from anyone or anything jumping out at you? I think Charisse had to jump off, but since she shared earlier about the child support, I might just go ahead and add that for her.
Excellent.
I'm trying to navigate technology. I had to update, so that's
No
why I'm
worries.
not. Okay.
And, you know, if you have things verbally you want to share too, happy to hear feedback sort of in real time as well. And then as Emily noted, we're not in a rush. Like, this doesn't need to be concluded tonight. We can send out the links and leave them open for others to join as well with the PowerPoint.
The seamless referral between Plan of Safe Care.
Yeah.
And ESET. I think that what I heard is that oftentimes we can't help families until they're in crisis, until something is wrong. And that is aimed at like some prevention and coming in before it falls apart. Am I correct in
exactly
understanding it? Okay.
Yep.
So, and that is why that sticks out for me, is because, prevention, right? And helping families before things go wrong.
Yep. Thanks, Natasha. That's very well
And
said.
I will say in the last couple of weeks, I've heard 2 positive responses about interactions. I had one myself this morning with a positive interaction with adoption CPS involvement.
Oh.
And then in like last week, I heard another mom, and I think that she received this seamless referral or this plan of care or whatever. I think that she benefited from that in some way. And you've changed her life. That has changed her life. So
Oh, thank you for sharing, Natasha. I will pass that on. It is a heavy lift to shift the culture of an organization that is geared towards safety and will remove you to mitigate deficiency, will remove the child to mitigate deficiency for safety, right? That is the history of child welfare. That is not a judgment statement about any single person. That is a history of child welfare. And to shift that culture to how do we partner and walk alongside? What does that mean for our approach? What does that mean for the resources and supports we need from community-based partners? It is awesome to hear when it comes to life, because it is a hard shift to make. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And she is successfully being a really great mom. So
That's awesome. That's great.
and also I see the like extending eligibility for ECAP and Head Start. Is that about income? And then it says and adoptive families.
Yeah, so that's continued tweaks. So some of that is about income, right? How do we make more families eligible for those pieces, right? Increasing eligibility, but also continuing to remove barriers. So what income do we count? For example, do children who are adopted stay eligible for a period of time? Pieces like that are some of the tweaks that we've considered in the past and are contemplating again.
Okay. Yes. And so I definitely think that whatever we can do to support children after they've been adopted, we will only increase continuity, consistency, and the ability for a family to actually adopt a child, right?
Yeah. And I think the other piece I would just add related to that is around guardianships, right? So adoption is one path to permanency and exit, but one of the changes that we are focused on and have through some Supreme Court rulings and legislative pressure is how do we support the exit to permanency through guardianship? So adoption requires termination of parental rights, which is traumatic for everyone. Parents, the children, the adoptive parents, all involved. It can be really complicated and hard. And so one of the things we've been doing is having subsidized childcare post-adoption and guardianship. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Is how do we support those adoptions and exactly that? How do we support that work post-adoption, post-guardianship? So some of that continuity remains so that family is stable.
And I don't want to take up all the space, but I wanted to let you know that was my personal experience today. Finally, my nephew, his 3rd generation CPS involvement. Finally today, the adoption case, like he's been up for adoption for a few years. We've never been able to really access him. We were able to meet with the person today, and he's going to create a path and an avenue for us to have a relationship with my nephew, because nobody can really adopt him because he's not necessarily safe. And so that's a big deal for my family. So I'm happy to speak on that or talk to you about it later, but thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Natasha, for sharing. Other thoughts or reflections before I think the last slide I had was just about next steps and what folks can expect, but I know that we'll send out the slide deck, the Jamboard link and the SurveyMonkey, along with my contact information as well as the CE teams. And so if folks have other things to share, certainly, or questions, reach out anytime for sure. I think really quickly, just for next steps, what it looks like for our team and then the work here is we're going to consolidate a lot of feedback over the next couple of months from advisory groups, from stakeholder groups, from a variety of folks. Oh, thanks, Jessica. And pull together sort of more formal proposals with cost estimates, who we're serving, how many people, et cetera. And then certainly circle back in the feedback loop. Probably, I'm just thinking brainstorming here, if when the meeting changes to August, probably that August meeting with more concrete what we're asking for, what we're putting forward. Although I've got a note and I'm going to send an email to Emily and Emily as well as my team to think about how we may come back briefly in July and just talk about some of the other areas of the agency beyond the early learning scope that we're working on as well, given the interest and array of experience on the group.
Yeah, I think we would all really love to learn
Yeah.
about some of the other areas. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, was that all? That was all, Allison, correct?
That's what I got. So we'll
Okay.
send the stuff out as feedback. I don't know if there's other things on the agenda. Happy to stick around and answer any other questions that folks have about DCYF. I don't know if there's other content y'all have to cover.
No, that was all we had on our agenda. So does anybody have any questions or anything they want to talk to Allison about before we close?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all that work and for the infographics and for explaining it, because as you probably know, it's very complicated. And so you broke that down in a way that at least I could grasp a little bit better. So thanks for that.
Thank you. It's always thank you. We strive to find the right elevation of a lot of wonkery and a lot of weeds and a lot of work.
Thanks, Allison. Well, right now our next meeting is scheduled for July 12th. That was the one that was originally going to be in person, but we'll be sending out a new time for the July 12th meeting, which will be 7 to 8:30. So the same time and format. And we'll also send out that doodle poll to try and get a good date for an August meeting. And we'll also send out the Jamboards and the Jamboard and SurveyMonkey that we chatted about today. But other than that, might be able to give you guys back some of your evening. Are there any final thoughts? Okay,
Thank you
well, thank
all.
you. Yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time. We know you're busy and have lots of other kids and things pulling you in different directions. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be here and give that feedback. Have a good night.